Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Gabriel Dusil. I am from Adele Ecosystem Limited. We want to give you a little bit of a different presentation today, which really may differ from some of the ICOs, the ICOs presentations. We want to give a vision of the future of blockchain and the crypto industry. And before we get there, we need to really discuss how we got here today and what brought us to, for example, this Adwell Media Conference. And I'd like to discuss and start this discussion from a quote from Abraham Lincoln. I'm Canadian, but I'm going to quote an American president. And it was from the Gettysburg Address, talking about a government that is of the people, by the people, and for the people. And I would like to present this statement as a basis for what Bitcoin means to us. For the first time in history, thanks to Satoshi Nakamoto, we have a currency that is of the people, by the people, and for the people. Meaning that there is no government control for this currency, there is no centralized control, and has created this paradigm shift in behavior and really looking at potentially this behavior as a version 2 of the internet moving forward. So if we have now a currency that is of the people, for the people, and by the people, then what is next? Not only just from the innovation that you're seeing at this event, but what is next really in the next 5 years, 10 years, and 20 years? And the start of that discussion is about understanding society. And I like to discuss this from the standpoint of borders. We have physical borders like land and sea. We have cultural borders like language differences and cultural differences. We have religious borders. We also have created, on purpose, for example, technological borders. We have so that we prevent, for example, technology being used in one part of the world compared to another. So as a society, we have a tendency to build borders to protect ourselves and, let's say, protect ourselves from our enemies. And sometimes borders are just happening just from the evolution of society, such as language and culture, for example. But we also have another part of society that is trying to break down borders. There are humanitarian initiatives like UNICEF. We have judicial, legal initiatives like the International Court of Justice. Economic borders that are being removed, for example, in the Schengen zone that we're in now. And then we have military international oversight, such as NATO. We have United Nations. And important in this discussion are standards and the removal of borders so that we have international standards from which we can all follow in order for us to interoperate and communicate. So in creating borders, we're also trying to remove them as well. So let's look at borders from the standpoint of protocols. In 1973, GPS, the Global Positioning System, was created by the US military. And that was a centralized system in order to identify devices anywhere around the world where they're located. Then we had Iridium, which was a global satellite for communication, telephone communication, voice and data, anywhere on the planet's surface. Then we moved into, or in the meantime, we created TCP/IP, initially utilized by ARPANET in the US for the purposes of creating a protocol that could not be brought down by an enemy force easily. Okay? In 1999, we created peer-to-peer networks, initially used in Napster, and then that was improved by BitTorrent. You may be familiar with BitTorrent. And now we have blockchain. I would argue that these other four protocols are very different than the first two in that they're pandemic. Pandemic in the sense that, like a virus, when a virus is released in the world, it's hard to get rid of that virus. We have to contain the virus. And these are protocols that are essentially pandemic. They're pervasive, they're persistent, they're hard to take down, similar to the creation of TCP/IP. And we've created improvements to TCP/IP or the internet in these pervasive protocols, these omnipresent protocols, and now we're in the blockchain phase. Blockchain being a infrastructure that is hard to take down and has a lot of processing power and is pervasive and persistent, in a sense, pandemic. Okay? So before I continue, I want to be clear on a couple things. One is what I talk about in terms of cyber versus crypto. Okay? Cyber, we refer to the internet, and crypto is what we are looking at in terms of a subset in the internet space of society and this technology that we call blockchain. So when I'm referring to crypto, I'm referring to specifically blockchain and virtual currencies. So what are the challenges that we face, or let's say in this case, what are the challenges of state authorities in terms of enforcing their laws in the presence of pandemic protocols? And this is a big challenge even today for any state around the world. How do they enforce their laws in the presence of pandemic protocols and targeting individuals that are breaking laws, for example? So they can go after three areas. They can go after infrastructure, let's say the cyber infrastructure in their country. They can go after corporations that are registered in their country. They can go after individuals in their country, citizens, for example, or those that are resident in their country. But the reality is that we have a lot of chaos right now in the legal courts on the enforcement of their state laws in cyberspace. There is an ongoing effort by every state to enforce their territorial jurisdiction, their individual jurisdiction, and their trans-territorial jurisdiction on individuals or companies that are breaking their laws. So this is a big challenge and is creating a lot of chaos in the judicial system. So taking this to the next step is really asking these questions of how far can crypto evolve in this state of pandemic protocols? Will crypto be controlled by states? Will there be a free zone or free rule zone, let's say? Or will the crypto space be self-regulated? And we don't know the answers to these questions, but these are initiatives that are happening right now in terms of how the legal structures and the state entities are creating legislations and regulations in order to control this space, because they're obviously slow to keep up with the technology, as we all know. Last question is, what is a virtual existence a trend for the future? Is a virtual existence a trend for the future? So I'd like to answer these three questions through the remainder of the presentation. And to move forward, we need to kind of understand what we mean by a state. Okay, the state of the country of Poland, the United States, England, any country, for example. And a state is defined by a territory. If you look this up on Wikipedia, is defined by a population, relationships with international states, other states, and having a functional governance, having a functional government. So how do we compare this to the crypto space? And it poses a big challenge for these states. Territory is virtual. The population is anonymous. Relations aren't really international per se because we're in a virtual space now, in a cyberspace. So the relations are now really around communities. And governance is an interesting one. This is the big challenge, and what is being considered to be solved by the blockchain is that governance is assumed to be programmatic. We have brought in to, for example, the Bitcoin blockchain, a programmatic code in order to prevent double spending. And that is assumed to have solved the financial issues of transacting between two parties. And we'll see in a moment that that actually hasn't really solved everything. Okay? Next is to look at what we refer to as a power hierarchy. And I refer to this as a socio-economic visual of the real world versus crypto. Okay? In the real world, and the economics majors in the audience may disagree with this, but this is just a simplistic model, that citizens are controlled by companies because companies employ them and fire them, pay them. Companies are paid by banks because companies need money from the banks. And banks are controlled by governments because governments set the laws that banks need to follow and everybody else. Okay, so this is purely not from a human rights perspective. This is really from a socio-economic perspective. My point is really what the hierarchy is in crypto. At the top of the chain are coders, the blockchain coders, those that create the rules of any given blockchain. They set all the rules and essentially are the micro-governance of the blockchain that they are coding. Then we have the miners that in the mining sense are settling the transactions and creating the blocks. There are services that are below the miners, which are the exchanges and other types of services that are utilizing the blockchain. Many of services, of course, that are here at the conference. And then we have traders that are trading, utilizing these services. The interesting thing about this slide is that citizens are outside of this hierarchy. And I'm not talking about you guys because we're at this conference. The mere fact that you are here means that you are part of this hierarchy. Citizens in the sense that those that don't understand technology or those that are considered technology as a barrier aren't entering into this market of crypto because they don't understand what trading means, they don't understand what cryptocurrency means, they don't know what Bitcoin is, and so on. So there is this exclusion, which is not necessarily on purpose, but the fact remains that they're excluded from this hierarchy right now, until we get some services into the blockchain space that bring these citizens into the hierarchy, and that requires some very ease of use and UI, UX, user interface and user experience in order to allow citizens to utilize the blockchain technologies and the crypto technologies. The other aspect here is that there are banks and governments are not included in the crypto hierarchy. Completely removed, because that was the purpose of Bitcoin blockchain, is to remove the aspect of government and banks from controlling this infrastructure and this technology. So you can see how this hierarchy of this social power, economic power, has completely flipped upside down. So let me define a couple terms. I took this from Wikipedia, and it really sets the stage in terms of what we mean in terms of moving forward from the aspect of crypto in general. There's governance. What does governance mean? If the coders are doing the governance, or is there no governance at all? Is it completely self-sustaining with no governance? Versus a sovereign state that wants to impose their power into the crypto space, and they're running into challenges. We also have crypto anarchists versus techno-libertarianism. And the techno-libertarians want to have a minimal control of government power, And the crypto-anarchists want zero control of government and centrally controlled power. So these are players that all have a role and a voice in this crypto space. Last one I'd like to add is geek. I'm not sure if you know what a geek is. You're looking at one, I'm a geek. Geeks are technically savvy, and I think maybe many of you could be geeks in the audience, and they are playing a very strong role because ultimately at the power hierarchy of blockchain, the geek is at the top of that pyramid. Okay? So where are we with code governance? If the blockchain or the Bitcoin blockchain is supposed to be self-governed and self-sustaining, then where are we with code governance? And the picture doesn't look that great. We have code governance to prevent double spending, but we have massive fraud. We have massive corruption. There's a lot of theft. There's unfair competition. There's a lot of monopolies now. It's considered that 5 miners in the world control the Bitcoin blockchain. So we have millions, if not billions of dollars that now have been stolen in this blockchain's space. So why hasn't code governance worked? And we want to explore that moving forward. Hopefully give you some answers. Okay? And the answer starts from this slide. We refer to many systems in the world of people, process, and technology. These system essentials are essentially essential components that run governments, that run companies, that run even your personal lives. We need to have a combination of people, process, and technology in many cases to run any given system. So we call these system essentials. The people bring the innovation, the technology brings the resilience, and the process is needed in order to really scale the solution to more and more zeros. In blockchain, let's say smart contracts or Bitcoin blockchain, it is assumed that the process and the technology combined solves the issue of governance. So by coding the rules to prevent double spending, we have self-governance in the blockchain. But the previous slide you saw that we have a lot of problems, right? We have a lot of corruption. We have a lot of theft. We have billions of dollars, billions of euros, billions of zloty that have been lost in this space. So why has this happened when we are programming governance into the code? And the reason is because the people are still involved. People are still in this hierarchy, and we create the weak link. So every time we create a new exchange into the system, we create vulnerabilities that get exploited by hackers. So let me close by saying that where is the cyberspace evolving to? And one of the areas we think that cyberspace is evolving to is as a borderless citizen, where we see people that in the world that are purely behaving and acting within the crypto space. Their employment is in crypto, their payment, salary is in crypto, their education is in crypto, and so on. So this is all part of what we call cyberversification or cryptoversification of this space. And that is a dynamic that we think is going to move forward. These individuals, they're breathing and they're eating and they're sleeping in the real world, but everything else is in the crypto space. And we're going to see more and more, we believe, this cyber and borderless citizen play out. We also see the aspect of multi-stakeholder governance playing a big role, because we're not expecting to have a unilateral state-enforced legal structure into the cyberspace, because there's anonymity and we can't target these individuals because we don't know who they are. The states don't know who they are. So what we believe that needs to happen to move forward is this need for multi-stakeholder governance where there's consensus. And we have micro-governance and macro-governance, bottom-up and top-down, where governments talk to communities and the blockchains, so collectively they come to a consensus of how to govern not the cyberspace, but the crypto space. And that will lead to standards, because once we have this infrastructure of governance, we can then create standards that are based on consensus, not legally binding standards, but a consensus-based agreement on standards in the blockchain space. And that may lead to chaining of blockchains. So we have cooperative and scalable structure so that the mainstream industry, mainstream citizens can then participate. The last one is this aspect of what we call virtual state. You may have seen Ready Player One, just came out in the theaters a couple weeks ago. It's a virtual reality concept of the near future. And that may play out in terms of how the existence of those in crypto will play not only their acting role in this space, but their entire existence and fantasies in a virtual state. And that could play out in the future, and how that relates to blockchain is really the question. But it's something to consider moving forward. Let me finish off by saying, are we ready for the future? It's clear that no individual technology is the silver bullet to solving a utopian future or a dystopian one. The crypto anarchists may want a dystopian future or a utopian one. That's why I put all these aspects into the middle. The reality is that blockchain probably won't be the solution to a utopian future or dystopian one. Technology won't be the silver bullet, as I mentioned, but it will move society forward. But having an expectation that blockchain or crypto will be utopian is, I believe, unrealistic. Let me finish off by saying that Adele is an incubator for blockchain innovation. We incubate ideas. We have several ideas in our community that we're incubating at the moment. We had our ICO last year, so we're not going through an ICO this year. Our first project will be a decentralized exchange called iFin, and we're coding that right now. So look forward to hearing more about that as we move forward into this year. We'll be releasing iFin later this year, and if you join our mailing list at adele.io, you'll hear more about that as we announce the progress of that project. I'd like to recognize Dr. Martina Shmuslerova. She collaborated on this presentation and worked together from a legal standpoint. She's an international legal expert that did a great job in formulating the messages of this presentation, so hopefully you enjoyed that. This is my CV. So thank you very much, and I think I made it on time, I hope. So have a good rest of the day. Thank you very much.